Welcome to this edition of Podcasting Magazine. Tonight, I'm actually joined by a very special guest, a friend, a colleague, someone that I've been following in and out of the social universe. Joined tonight by Mike Sevilla, MD. He's a family physician. He runs his own blog. He has his own blog talk radio program, amongst other things. He's got a very long list of accolades, which we will get to throughout. I can't do enough justice for introducing Mike to the show tonight, but essentially Mike and I met maybe 2007, 2008 at a podcast camp, what's called PodCamp Ohio. And since then, we've just kind of been intertwined in various social platforms. So let me tell you a little bit about Mike. Mike basically runs his own blog talk radio program called the Mike Sevilla Show. He does essentially commentary on medicine, social media, and life. So, Mike, welcome to the show, Dr. Mike Sevilla.
That's all right, Drew. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation tonight.
Great. So, Mike, I know that introduction was pretty lousy, and I kind of wanted to hand the reins over to you. Can you tell the listening audience a little bit more about yourself? From a medical position as well as in the tech podcasting area.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was born and raised here in northeastern Ohio, and I am a family physician, or what people might know as a primary care physician, and that's something I always wanted to be, especially in medical school and in my training. I'm in a group practice here in a town called Salem, Ohio. It's a town of about 12,000 people here in northeastern Ohio. I'm in a group with 4 other family docs. And, I got started in, social media probably, I don't know, a long time ago. It seems like a long time. I was looking at that today, preparing for this, and I think it's even been 7 or 8 or 9 years or something like that. I know we'll get to it in the course of our conversation, but I've always enjoyed technology, and just wanted to see kind of what it can do, and always being an advocate for my patients, so that's kind of the seedlings of me starting in the social media space. That's probably a good introduction to get things started tonight, Drew.
Sure. Well, that's excellent. And as you were talking there, and I was kind of thinking back accurately when we actually crossed paths per se. There was a video hosting site, it's still in existence today, called Vidler. And I think
That's
that
right.
was my first interaction with your former moniker, which we might get to in a little bit later in the show. So those were the days, and I was kind of looking back amongst mutual friends that we've kind of grown over the years. Some of them, recently have had babies and they're getting married, and it's just kind of crazy. So
everybody's growing up.
Yeah, what's all that? I think I'm going to start to grow hair, and these guys are just getting started. Right.
I totally forgot about that site. Yeah, and I met a lot of people through that, and I still keep in touch with a lot of them today. So you young people out there, you don't know about the Vidler, but that was pretty significant. That was before Facebook and Twitter, but we won't get into that too much. So
That's right. That's and a lot has changed since then. Some of the technologies and the emerging technologies have certainly improved over the years. But some of the faces and some of the people that we're intertwined with, go on. So, and we've lost some along the way as well. So it's
exactly
definitely life. So, let's kind of get into that. You've been a host of a podcast that's changed names a few times. Since this is Podcasting Magazine, we might as well just kind of dive into that aspect of what you're doing in the social space. And that name is actually changed over the years, primarily for, I would assume, branding purposes. But the contents basically remain the same and consistent. Can you tell viewers and listeners a little bit more about why you got started in podcasting and blog talk radio?
Actually, I when I started first exploring social media in the first place, it was all the way back in 2005, and I was kind of fascinated by it as far as blogging and its kind of part in politics, because it was really talked about in politics in 2004 during that election cycle. So the next year, I started exploring things in the social media space, thinking like, oh, are there any physicians out there using things like blogs? And I did research on this today, and it was iTunes 4.9
Wow.
in 2005, when podcasting was first put on the iTunes platform. And so throughout that summer and in the fall there, I was poking around and exploring because I was always interested in kind of talk radio when I was driving around, not really politics, but more like the medical shows, because obviously that's what my interest is. And I was driving around, and I said, oh, maybe I could do something like that, because I've always people have told me I have a face for radio. And you probably get that a lot on this.
All the time.
on
Yeah,
these
same here.
interviews. So I became ill at the end of 2005, and I was sick for a week, and I wasn't doing anything, driving my wife nuts. So I did some searches on the iTunes to see if there was any kind of podcast that would I'd be interested in. There weren't any kind of medical things that I was interested in at the time, but there was I remember a one about a regional airline pilot. And he had something every week and where he was at, and I learned a lot about the airline industry. And what really kind of got me in was the storytelling. So I was listening to that podcast, and it took me about 6 months before I said, do I have a voice? Can I do something in the social media space? And I didn't do podcasting because at that time in 2006, I was just really intimidated by all the technical type of things. So I started a blog, and I didn't know what to call it. So I went to Google. I went to Blogger, and I tried to find a cool kind of buzzworthy name. And that's kind of how the Dr. Anonymous blog started. And I was an anonymous blogger for the first few years. And the reason was the culture back then in medicine and social media was to be an anonymous blogger. And back at that time, they had people like Grunt Doc and Panda Bear and very creative anonymous bloggers. So I tried to get in with that. And what I did at that time in the blogging sphere was to just tell stories. I talked about patients, which is not a good idea now, but that was kind of the culture back then. So I started the Dr. Anonymous podcast on Blog Talk Radio later that year. I think it was 2006. And the reason I chose Blog Talk Radio was because some of my blog friends were using it, and they did all of the processing for you. They generated an iTunes feed for you. They hosted the podcast on their site because I didn't have the time to do editing. I didn't have time or I didn't even know how to build an RSS feed or any of that type of stuff. So it was really one-stop shopping for me. So that's why I chose that platform. And also on that platform, in the next year or two after I started, they started having things like a live chat room, which at that time never really happened.
Right.
So I started learning about live in-time, real-time interactions with my listeners, and this was right before Twitter. So that was a very exciting thing for me. People were able to call into the show, make fun of me, all that type of stuff. So I really learned about the live, real-time interactions with fans, which I really enjoyed. It just gives a very different feel to that. So why did I change Dr. Anonymous? Because people started like reading and listening to my stuff, Drew. I just couldn't believe it. Like, I didn't know, like, people wanted to know what I wanted to say. And then I started getting requests to do speaking engagements. So I was like, oh, well, like I'm like anonymous, right? And they said, It's okay. You're one of the only doctors out there doing this stuff. So we want you to come and talk and say why you're
Anonymously.
doing it, share your story, all that type of stuff. So I did that for about a year, and then I'm like, well, to really get some credibility in this space, especially my own kind of medical community. I mean, I had to just come out as myself. So. So eventually, I rebranded everything, which is an interesting process. So now, I'm me, Dr. Mike Sevilla, drmikesevilla.com. I have a blog and a podcast and all that kind of stuff. And what I talk about is I talk about things that are important to me. I'm a primary care physician. I'm a family physician. I talk about things as far as health policy. I talk about Medicare, payment models. I talk about patient education. I have interviews with a lot of different people. And sometimes I just do commentary, just me, just talking about stuff. Not sometimes just not medicine. Sometimes it could just be about some kind of hot topic or the weather here in northeastern Ohio. So I've really enjoyed the podcasting because I think it's a different way to express yourself. It's a different way than blogging. It's a different way than video. I think for me, I think podcasting is the best way to kind of do conversation, a long form conversation like we're having now, Drew, and to explore those things a little bit better. And that's what I've enjoyed the most, podcasting. And as of now, I think I have over 300 episodes in the past, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years. And I don't do it every week. I did for like 2 or 3 years, every week. But now just with my schedule, it's just been a lot more difficult to do. But I still do it every once in a while. And I love it. I encourage people to experiment with it, to look at it, because it's been really fun for me to do podcasting.
That's tremendous. Everything that you just said there was completely fascinating to me for multiple reasons. Number one, some people may not realize it, but I come from a healthcare background as well. Kind of changed pathways and career. So understanding, the stressors and some of the regulations that go on in the industry and how that may translate over to social media, podcasting, video casting, all that other kind of stuff. There's a lot of dynamics that may not be held over other types of podcasters, people that, kind of talk about entertainment or other subject matters that don't have the restrictions that we may have had, in healthcare. But there's a ton of stories that are just waiting to be told from a healthcare perspective, from a nursing perspective, from a primary care physician perspective, from the patient level. There's just so many dynamics there that I think if we work well within the boundaries, it would be completely fascinating to hear some of the discussions, some of the topics, and the debates that go on. Certainly, with I'm sure that you've had many conversations about the ACA and how that's going to affect primary care and just patients' accessibility to healthcare. And I'm sure these are conversations that you've either already had on your program, or people are waiting to discover and listen to. Is that kind of what you may have experienced over your career, both as a podcaster and a primary care physician? Are these some of the issues that you've dealt with?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and you probably talk to other podcasters as well. When I'm having these conversations with my peers, whether it's on the phone or at conferences, they're very robust conversations, and I think they should be shared with other people, with other my colleagues, with the general public. And what better way to do that is in a podcast form, to get those points out there, and people can chime in and say, "Oh, that's a great point," or "This is happening in my part of the country. This is the state law where it's happening with me. This is what's happening with this insurance company." So whatever industry you're in, people are going to have really good conversations about whatever, and podcasting is a great way to do that. I remember I had a podcast early on where we were just having fun, and I had